It's a ridiculous day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has just revealed more cards from Duskmourn, House of Horror. Some are obscenely powerful, some are insanely goofy, and some are absolutely amazing.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for another installment of Mega Magic News. Today is all about Duskmourn, House of Horror. And if you have not heard the story yet or read it, you can check that story out over on my Fantasy Geographic channel. I have the entire thing there for you, including some interesting background information about the world too. There is a lot going on. And speaking of a lot going on, we have a wide array of spoilers to look at today, including one that to me is an absolute home run. Every once in a while, Wizards puts all of the elements of a card together in such a way that it becomes magnifique. I absolutely can't wait to show you what we have in store. So let's do it. All right, my friends, we are starting off with something totally goofy. Ghost Vacuum. 1 mana for an artifact that says tap, exile target card from a graveyard, 6 and tap, sacrifice the Ghost Vacuum. Put each creature card exiled with Ghost Vacuum onto the battlefield under your control with a flying counter on it. Each of them is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types. Activate only as a sorcery. Now, to get it out of the way, I have to admit that I much prefer cards that fall inside of what I consider to be normal Magic the Gathering. This screams Ghostbusters, which makes sense with what Wizards is doing with all of the different 80s style movies, but if this was a card that said Spirit Vessel, Spirit Prison, something along those lines, and it showed some kind of actual arcane device that didn't look like an 80s toy, then that would feel more in the normal flavor of Magic. But putting that aside and evaluating this as a Ghostbusters style card, first of all, it totally fits the bill. Look at the artwork. You can see ghosts getting sucked into it. The maniacal look on this chick's face. Yeah, sucking up them ghosts, son. But from an actual mechanical standpoint, actually evaluating it as a Ghostbusters card, it works really well. Exiling cards from the graveyard is like capturing the ghosts, right? And then when you actually go and pay 6 and sacrifice the Ghost Vacuum, to me, that's like the scene in Ghostbusters where that one guy comes along and is like, we're shutting you down. And he shuts down the actual like ghost storage system. And all of a sudden, all these ghosts tear out and they're flying all over the place. So them all coming back as 1/1 spirits with flying totally fits the flavor of a Ghostbuster scenario. And if you change this, like I said, from a vacuum into some kind of urn or wand or amulet of ghost seizing, then this could easily be a regular everyday Magic card that would 100% fit with the flavor of stuff from the past. Ultimately, I do like this design. I love cards that let you snake cards out of your opponent's graveyards, especially when you're dealing with a set where there's a ton of cards that care about the graveyard, either resurrecting guys or you've got delirium effects, so they care about the different card types you have. So this doesn't just exile creatures. You're only going to get to get creatures back when you use the ultimate ability, but you can use this to hose your opponent's strategies. Why, oh, were you about to do that? Oops, sucked it up into my vacuum. Which that feels goofy to say, but ultimately, I like this card. Moving on, we've got Grievous Wound. This card, when I read it out, I went, what? It's 2 black and 3 for an enchantment aura. I feel like this should have been a curse. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you don't know, there are a series of enchantments that are called curses in Magic. A lot of them feature the same hapless looking douche with a terrible haircut. But ultimately, the idea is that you curse your opponent. And this feels like a big curse. It's an enchant player. It does cost 5 mana, but enchanted player can't gain life. And whenever enchanted player is dealt damage, They lose half of their life rounded up every time. I'll ping you for one. By the way, you also lose half of your life rounded up. Like, this is insane to me. And also, awesome card design. The flavor text says, Vicky was so tired. The pain began to fade. You were so brave, said her grandmother's voice from somewhere far away. But it's time to rest now. This screams horror. The artwork with her laying there all curled up in the center of the frame with all these black smears of ichor around her, absolutely wild. If you take away the set of headphones that are up there, like Walkman headphones, and maybe the shoes as well, then you don't have anything that feels modern at all. And this could easily be original era Magic art. And honestly, you could leave the shoes. You could get away with the shoes. The headphones are the only thing that really tie it into the Duskmourn aesthetic of modern-esque kind of technology, but it's barely noticeable. And the overall flavor of this, a woman who's just laying there, dying of a terrible wound, and moving her even slightly just causes massive amounts of her, like, blood to just flow out. Her life is slipping away. Like, it's epic. The framing of the body, the not actually her grandmother telling her to let go and give in and all this kind of stuff, that's the vibe that it gives. And it's amazing. Honestly, actually, I'm surprised as well. The name Grievous Wound has never been used in Magic the Gathering before, but this is an absolute home run in terms of card design. The name, the flavor, the artwork, all of it, along with the mechanics, tie together in a tight little package. This is what I love about Magic the Gathering. Moving on. We got Hushwood Verge. Now, this is a cycle of lands. I'm not going to show you all of them because they're all the same, just for different colors. So we're just going to use this one as an example. So you're going to be able to get them for all 5 or maybe all 10 different color combinations, but they at least have the allied color ones in this set. They've spoiled those. It remains to be seen if they're going to do a full cycle of 10 with the enemy colors as well. But either way, all these lands come into play untapped, tap for 1 color, and if you happen to have the right lands for it, so in this case, a forest or a plains, it also taps for another color. So it's a white-green land that'll give you green right out the gates. And then if you just have a forest, it also taps for a white. So it's an interesting way to splash white into a deck if you want to, where this land's always going to be ready to produce green. It's always going to come in untapped. And if you have, let's say, a few cards in your deck that kicker for 1 white, you can put these in without really negatively impacting your deck, unless you have cards that care about how many forests you have, right? And I picked this one because I find the artwork to be the most interesting. The rest are really dark. This one has this doorway of hope, right? The flavor text says, here, the hauntwoods churn like a viper's nest as monstrous creatures prowl hungrily towards the ghostly light. This is one of those scenarios where when you see it, you're going to be like, oh, salvation. And then you flow towards the door and you realize, wait a minute, this is just toilet paper flowing out of this door. And this is a doom trap. And then something just reaches through and grabs your head, right? So I like the beguiling nature of it, the illusion of safety, as well as the weird hangy balls that are here as well. They've got this weird sort of like, when you brush against them, are they going to burst into gank on you? Like, it's just got this, hey, everything seems okay. Wait a minute, do those bushes have eyes in them? It's got that, at first blink, safety lies ahead, and then as you travel forwards, horror envelops you. So that's pretty sweet. After that, we've got Inquisitive Glimmer. Now, most of the stuff we're going to look at is rare and mythic rare, but there are a few cards outside that I want to talk about. This one being a room-esque style bonus card. 1 blue and 1 white for a 2/3 enchantment Fox Glimmer. And if you didn't know, the flavor text explained glimmers right here. It says, glimmers are physical manifestations of survivors' hope and courage. Their presence was one of the few things that can protect from Valgavoth's malevolent influence. That's a cool idea. Manifestations of hope that can shield you against the horror, but as you lose faith, while you travel through the house and you watch your friends get struck down and you realize you're never going to escape, your glimmer gets weaker and fades until it's non-existent. We get to see people in the actual Duskmourn story who have lost their glimmer, lost their hope. And if you haven't checked it out already, I've done the entire story for Duskmourn over on my Fantasy Geographic channel, so you can check it out there if you want to. Now, this card gives you a discount on your enchantments. They cost 1 less to cast, and it costs 1 less to unlock rooms. Interestingly enough, it says unlock costs you pay, not unlocking rooms. So if Wizards creates more abilities in the future that also say unlock, this could theoretically have more use. But it looks like white-blue is going to be the color that specializes in room magic. And I mean, it makes sense when it comes to enchantments. White and blue are where you're going to find a heavy influence for that. The artwork shows this little fox glimmer hanging out on these crazy warping chairs. It's got such a chill little vibe. Its crazy little tail shows that it looks like it leapt down, bounced up. And so it can get ahead of you to lead the way through the house. They can do that. But then it's got that long trail that you can follow like a ribbon of hope. Very cool. Then we've got Leyline of Resonance. Red is getting some redonkulous stuff in this set. 2 red and 2 for an enchantment. If you don't know what the ley lines are already, basically they are cards that if you have them in your starting hand, you can actually start with them in play. So this one says that here, and then down here it says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single creature you control, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now, I know what you guys are thinking probably. Oh, the mice from Bloomburrow are about to become an extra big nightmare. And you're right. This combined with the mice ability is absolutely crazy. Your bonus spells that you're casting to boost up your guys and get their Valiant triggers going off are also going to love this, right? Where it's just like, now there's more creatures to target. Well, not more creatures. There's more things to target your creatures with. The artwork just shows like a flaming hallway that at first glance you're like, wait, what's going on? And then you see all the billowing smoke up at the top. And again, you've got a doorway that looks like hope and safety ahead, but you've got to get through all these noxious fumes. It's not really clear looking at this artwork how this would end up copying spells at all. It feels like this artwork was probably intended for something else, but there's no denying that it is very evocative artwork, right? And the ley lines are interesting cards. We're not getting all new ley lines. Like Leyline of the Void, the one that just stops cards from going to the graveyard, the black one, is coming back once again. Surprise, surprise, because that one is a powerhouse that everybody loves. So I'm not surprised to see that. Now, moving on to the next card. We've got Meathook Massacre 2. Wizards has revisited the concept with essentially Meathook Massacre 2 is like the original Meathook Massacre times 2 in terms of the casting cost. Because the original one cost 2 black and X. This one costs 4 black and double X. But it does not do the same thing. The first Meathook Massacre said all creatures get -X. Now, this one says, when it enters, each player sacrifices X creatures. So you have to spend at least 6 mana to get a sack going on. And at that point, it's 6 mana to make each player sack a creature. But where it gets really crazy is with these 2 abilities. Whenever a creature you control dies, you may pay 3 life. If you do, return that card under your control with a finality counter on it. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they can pay 3 life. If they don't, it comes into play under your control with a finality counter on it. This totally feels like that one giant demon from the old Alara days. I can't specifically remember his name at this point, but he had the ability where your opponent had to pay or you were going to get their stuff. But this one on top of it lets you bring your guys back. Finality counters means they're not going to hit the graveyard again, but who cares? This is bonkers. If you just do it to sack for 1, the creature you sack, you can pay 3 life and get it back. And if your opponent doesn't pay 3 life, you get the creature they sacked as well. And clearly, Commander players gonna love this as well. Now, what remains to be seen is if this is more balanced for the standard environment. The first Meathook Massacre was absolutely bonkers, and it tore things up and ended up eating a ban. And right now, black is pretty dominant. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of you who are sick of seeing a second turn 1/1 bat that lets you look at, I'm looking at your hand and taking your best card and smacking you with a lifelinker, right? So black is already on the scene and pretty mean. But this does cost 4 black bare minimum, 6 if you want to get the effect going. So will it unbalance standard? I don't know. The game is sped right up to the point where theoretically, depending on how things go, is it going to be fast enough? This might be one of those ones that at first glance feels like absolutely broken, but might not be too powerful, because sometimes mythics do that. They kick you right in the stomach and you go, oh, what's going on? And then when you actually see the card in play, you go, oh, okay, so I guess I overreacted to the power level of it. This is one of those where I'm not 100% sure which direction it's going to go in, but absolutely cube worthy, absolutely amazing from a flavor perspective. Look at this butcher. Look at the actual gigantic stitches in his back. Like, what? Is there somebody else inside this skin? Is this one of the rippers? You've got all the body parts around him. You've got what looks like rib meat laying there in front of him, like it's rib fest. There's this big light there. Is that supposed to represent some kind of moon? The little kind of shadowy parts of that, is that a moth referencing Valgavoth? I don't know. This is a dark and terrifying scene, and a card that could be insanely powerful. It is a legendary enchantment. I did forget to mention that. So you could only have one of these out. If you could have multiple of these out, then my evaluation of it would be, yo, this is way too crazy. It's probably going to need to get banned. But they might be walking the line of just acceptable enough when it comes to Standard. We'll have to see. Standard is 3 years now, and the cards in it can lead to some absolute insanity, right? So this one I've got my eye on. Moving on, we've got Nico, Light of Hope. Why are you smiling like that in this house of horrors? Honestly, this artwork feels to me like they just repurposed Kaldheim artwork. Even the blue in the background gives the vibe of Kaldheim, and it feels like they just kind of inserted some shadowy hands and stuff behind him, because that's what they do. They take artwork that they created for previous sets that never got used, and they insert it in. Now, ultimately, just the fact that Nico's smiling isn't enough for me to say for sure that's what's going on, but it's got that vibe. They just paint a weird little techno gadget on the hip and then use artwork they already had, right? So 1 blue, 1 white, and 2 for a 3/4. When Nico enters, create 2 shard tokens. They're enchantments. 2 mana, sack it to scry 1, then draw a card. But where it gets interesting is down here. 2 and tap, exile target non-legendary creature you control. Shards you control become copies of it until the beginning of the next end step. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you can turn those 2 shards into whatever creature you already have out who's not legendary. Plus, if that creature is somebody who has a come into play kind of trigger, then each time you exile and bring it back, you're gaining value there as well. And this ability references what's going on in the story, where Nico can actually trap beings, ghosts. He can trap enemies in the shards, but also ends up using a shard to save Nashi from some wicker folk. So again, if you haven't checked out the story, that's a part of the story. And that kind of magic is actually really cool. The idea of being able to trap people inside of these shards, and apparently with the ghosts of Duskmourn, they weren't really able to trap them in any other reasonable way according to the story, which does contradict things we've seen like the ghost vacuum, but it does make Nico seem more powerful with that ability to shard snare ghosts, right? So overall, 4 mana for a 3/4, it's all right. The fact that you're going to be able to use it to make multiple copies of a guy you already have out, that's where the power is. Then we've got Overlord of the Flood Pits. This is crazy to me, right? These impending Avatar horrors are wild, and this is the kind of stuff Blue loves. So 2 blue and 3 for a 5/3 with flying. It's got Impending 4, and you can pay 2 blue and 1 to cast it as an enchantment. So it'll be an enchantment for 4 turns, then turn into a creature. Whenever it enters or attacks, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. So for 3 mana, you can put it out as an enchantment, which will trigger anything that cares about enchantments. You get to draw 2 cards, and then you pitch a card. And so for blue decks that just want to sit back ready to answer all your stuff, for control decks, this is amazing. It lets them sculpt out their hand a little earlier, right? Get down deeper into the deck, getting rid of something they don't need, and then it just sits there waiting to become a 5/3 that can then swing in the air, and each time it does, nets you 1 card up. You're going to draw 2 cards and pitch 1. So even if your hand's empty, it's basically like, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. Pick the best one, put it in your hand, put the other one in the graveyard, right? Like, that is super strong for a blue. And the artwork is amazing. This is an absolutely horrific looking beast. Like, what is this on his chest? Are these like sewer grates? Does water flow forth from it? The fact that it's got these books floating around it, kind of like a kami from Kamigawa, but instead it has these ghastly hands. Like, do you find this somewhere in a flooded out library where the hands just reach out of books that you've grabbed up? Like, this is really, really crazy flavor. And what is that in his back? Is that like a giant hook? Does he like pop down from the ceiling? Is he on a rope? I don't know, man. It does kind of feel half Eldrazi-ish with the crazy tentacle claws and stuff, right? But either way, really epic card. Then we've got the Swarm Weaver. 1 green, 1 black, and 2 for a 2/3. When it enters, create 2/1/1 black and green insect creature tokens with flying. And then it's got Delirium. As long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, insects and spiders you control get +1/+1 and have death touch. This is a fun little lord that gives you some insect action, will boost up your spiders, boost up your insects, and it doesn't feel too out of control. It's 4 mana for a 2/3 that gives you 2/1/1s. So ultimately, on the power scale, this doesn't feel too off the charts, but it is fun for anyone who likes scarecrows because it's a scarecrow. It's an artifact creature, which adds more usefulness to it, and it's just overall got some really funky flavor. Every time I look at it, though, I'm like, okay, so it's a giant tree folk, but it's got like a pineapple glued to it, and it's got a big feed me Seymour mouth. Who wants a kiss, but its eyes are in its mouth? Kiss my eyes, right? Like, it's just, it's so weird. Although the skeleton skull way off on the other side there, that does look pretty evocative, right? So, I don't know, there's just something about its head that's really goofy to me. So after that, we've got Turn Inside Out. This is the only common we're going to talk about because it feels uncommonly powerful. 1 red for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. When it dies this turn, manifest Dread. So you get to give +3 powered instant speed for 1 red. And if the creature ends up dying, which it probably will because you're going to play it in like mono red rush, then you get to manifest another creature off of your deck, or not even a creature, because you just look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put one face down as a 2/2. So if you have a land on top of your deck, instead of drawing it, now it's a 2/2 to add into the rush. So, I mean, with the level of power that decks like the Slick Shot deck, for example, have, this thing feels like it's going to fit in super, super easy and just going to take over the place of one of the red spells that are already in the deck. It's just, the power level is undeniable. And the flavor is absolutely wild. I mean, look at what's going on. This person's body is being pulled open by magic. And then you've got all these crazy teeth inside the flesh that they basically get a gigantic chest mouth that they can use to gnash and tear you apart, right? But even more than that, if you look inside, you can see someone crawling out. So that's basically the manifestation of Dread. That's the extra creature being birthed from the end of this creature. It's such a cool representation of it just clawing its way out of their insides. That is real horror. And it doesn't hurt that this maniac has this huge grin on his face while this is happening. Like, your chest is being torn open, bro, and something is crawling out of you, okay? That's got a Aliens feel to it, right? Absolutely. Like, this doesn't look like that, but it has the same vibe of just this thing tearing out of you. But this guy's super happy about it, which makes it really, really unsettling, actually. So this is some really cool artwork and a really powerful common. Now we have Tyvar the Pummeler. I love Tyvar. 2 green and 1 for a 3/3 Alpha Warrior. Tap another untapped creature you control. He gains indestructible until end of turn, and then you tap him. So remember, you can be attacking with him. He's already tapped, and you can use this ability. You can tap any creature you have that's untapped, and he will just be indestructible for the turn. If he's already tapped, it doesn't matter, right? Like, tapping him again does nothing. So there's no downside to that. And then on top of it, you've got this crazy overrun ability where for 2 green and 3, creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So it's going to be a bare minimum of +3/+3 because Tyvar's 3/3. And if you have other big creatures out, like this doesn't give trample, but who cares? This is awesome, right? Like I'm a big fan of crazy greenness, and this is crazy greenness. And I like Tyvar a lot as a big beef boy brawler who just goes around laying waste to everybody. The flavor text says, they just keep coming and coming. Perfect for my morning workout. And that embodies the flavor that Tyvar carries throughout this story because he is super fearless. And I know he's wielding a baseball bat with like barbed wire or chains around it, but it's close enough to a stick that this just feels like normal everyday Magic artwork, right? You've just got him facing off against an undead horde. So it gets a big thumbs up for me from that regard. Overall, I like this. There's a lot tucked into this 3-mana package. And don't forget, he's an elf. So he can go into elf decks that can generate insane amounts of mana and just go, let's crush, right? Like this is a very exciting card. And then we've got Victor Valgavoss Seneschal. I wish that this had somehow been included in the story because this is not an element of the story at all. So he's 1 black, 1 white, and 1 for a 3/3 human warlock. He's got Eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, surveil 2 if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, each opponent discards a card. If it's the third time, put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So just using, like, for example, Nico and having 2 shard tokens not activate, but come into play, I should say, then you're going to get to surveil 2 and each opponent pitches a card. And then if you happen to play 1 more enchantment, you also get to resurrect a guy for free. There is a lot packed into this. And the artwork's awesome. I love the way that he's standing there in greeting. He's got like a little smile on his face. His eyes are just 2 glowing beacons, right? Which would draw moths in. The blinding eyes and the crazy little headpiece that looks like moth wings really does tie him. I mean, actually, if you look at his robe too, they do evoke a moth nature too. The eyes on the shoulders and the overall wing feel. So it's definitely got the right flavor. And I like the fact that he is framed by this doorway into some kind of broken part of the house. You can see little thorns and things sticking out of it as well. So it's obviously a foresty area as well, right? Because you got the leaves up at the top. Or are those cocoons? Oh, I think those are cocoons, actually. Oh, okay. That's even more interesting. Right on. I didn't notice that the first time I looked at this. So Victor's really cool. And then we return to Ghost. Oh, wait, hold on. There's one more. There's a room. Okay, so Central Elevator. Whoa, oh, don't worry. I'm still here. I'm over here. Okay, 1 blue and 3. When you unlock this room, search your library for a room card that doesn't have the same name as a room you control. Reveal it. Put it into your hand, then shuffle. And then Promising Stairs. 1 blue and 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1. You win the game if there are 8 or more different names among unlocked doors of rooms you control. I think it's a lot of fun when they create like new weird win cons based on new card types. And the idea that you've mastered a bunch of rooms of Duskmourn, what does that represent? Does that represent you winning because you become one with Duskmourn and now you can command its power for your own? Or is it like considering that you've dominated enough rooms that you've actually defeated Valgavoth somehow and you win by escaping the house? Like it's got multiple different options in that regard, and I am cool with it. Ultimately, it is funky. What else is funky to notice about this is the most benign looking sort of artwork. We're dealing with a house of horrors, and I like that this leads to other rooms. Like you ultimately use this one right here to search for other rooms. So you can get in this elevator and then you end up, these lead to horrific rooms, where the Promising Stairs, it's like, where does this lead? Does it lead to another room or does it lead to salvation? If you've been through enough rooms, if you've unlocked enough rooms, these Promising Stairs actually lead to your salvation. So that is some fun flavor overall, right? Like these cards are definitely interesting. And we have looked at everything we're going to look at today. So if you made it all the way through this video with me, let me know that you are a hardcore survivor down in the comments. All right. A big shout out to my patrons and channel members for supporting my channel. You guys rule. I'm going to do a live stream over on my live stream channel tonight. Feel free to come on by and hang out. We're going to have a good time. And I'll mention one more time, over on my channel, Fantasy Geographic, you can check out the entire Duskmourn story and some extra information about Duskmourn as well, if you want to just know about the different peoples who live there and all that. I've got about 7 different Duskmourn videos for you to check out. So go and do that now. All right, because I'm out of here. I'm a ghost.